Welcome to the Fire Mountain Gems and Beads Jewelry Making Studio. I'm Lisa Pavelka, and today you're going to learn how to make an iridescent image transfer pendant using some of my products and polymer clay. More specifically, we're going to be working with the new Fimo professional clay. This is a clay that's based on a pure pigment true color system, and in the assortment pack it comes with a recipe chart for over 170 foolproof, easy to make blends of different colors. But that's something we'll check out at another time. One of the things I love about this clay, in addition to being super strong and having that pure pigment system, is that it's got a reclosable package, which is unique to polymer clay. You just pull apart the seams, and then you can safely store your clay without cross-contamination of different colors when you have some left over and you're not using the rest. But when we work with polymer clay, it's important to condition it. It needs to be kneaded or run through your pasta machine till it's nice and pliable, warm and supple. So we're going to take a little white. We always start with the lightest color first, and we're going to work on the largest setting of your machine. You need to know what number that is because it varies from machine to machine. Could be number 1, might be number 9, who knows. So check that out, and then when you're ready, start with thin slices on the largest setting, folding it always with the fold to the bottom or the side. And then when it starts to get soft, you can reduce it down if you need a thinner setting. So for this project, I usually use about the 3rd or the 4th largest setting. And it's okay to skip 1 or 2 settings at a time, but I usually don't skip more than 2. So I'm taking it down on this machine to the 3rd largest setting. So sometimes when you use your machine, you'll find you pick up colors from another clay that you used before. Don't worry about those, just keep blending until they disappear. And when you have a nice uniform sheet that's clean, free of any bubbles or divots or ridges in it, you can go ahead and lay it down on a small ceramic tile or a mirror, or here I have a little piece of glass, but smooth it from one end to the other. You don't want to trap any air underneath. Now I'm working with some image transfers from one of my collections. There's several here at Fire Mountain Gems and Beads. This is from the vintage set. So this is the photographic one, or you can choose one of the Art Deco pieces, or use a different set that's available. I've pre-trimmed my transfer. You can use scissors or scrapbook punches, and we just need to get this wet. So I'm just dipping it in ordinary tap water. And we're going to let it sit for just about 30 to 60 seconds. That's about how long it takes. You can also check out my blank DIY transfer paper so you can print your own photographs, sayings, whatever you like, reproductions of your kids' artwork. You can shrink those down, but be sure to follow the directions to print them backwards and use them upside down, because your inkjet inks aren't going to be permanent. So once it's sat for a while, you're going to take a paper towel or a Kleenex or a baby wipe and blot away any excess water. And I'm going to take a closer look here. If you've let it get wet and sit long enough, it should easily start to slide off of the paper, just like that. If it doesn't, that means you need to maybe get it wet again, let it sit for a few more seconds. Be careful, these are really delicate, thin films, so you want to just slide them off gradually, and you'll place them over the clay with the backing still on, and just slide it right back out, like that. But if you want to add a unique twist, something a little extra special, I like to use my foils. So let's see, nice crisp photographic image in seconds. But if you want to do something different, let's take a look at how we could add foil to create an iridescent sheen in the background. So we're going to lift this up with our craft knife, because it's nice to have different ways to do things, I think. All right, so from my Expressions collection, I'm using this oil slick foil. Now, the instructions are in the package, but you just need to know that all the foils are applied with the color facing up. So I don't cut the foil into a small piece. I leave it intact, which makes it easier to handle for my next project. And I'm going to lay down a corner of this, and what makes the foil stick to the clay is the heat, not so much the pressure. So lay it down, And you can take a piece of scrap paper. I'm taking a little bit of this napkin here, and with your fingers nice and flat, we're going to burnish for 30 to 60 seconds. I'm going to try to speed that up a little bit with a little extra pressure. But it's important to keep the clay nice and flat. We don't want to create some valleys and ridges. Now, once you've burnished firmly, and this, using a piece of paper, scrap paper, like this napkin for instance, what that does is it eliminates the drag from body oils or clay residue that might be on your fingers and allows you to burnish more quickly, which generates more heat, which means we'll probably have a better chance of having success. Now, when I rip this off, it may not go so well the first time, but don't be alarmed, that's normal. Ready? We don't pull up, we pull backwards as quickly as we can. And voila. So you can see here, and I'm going to angle it a little bit, some different angles. It didn't lay the foil down everywhere. Sometimes I don't mind if there's a few little speckles that don't lay down, but if you want to fix it, let me show you how to do that. We're going to realign the foil back in place, covering those spots, and we're going to reburnish. Now here's the trick. After you've reburnished, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to rip it off as quickly as you can, but this time we're going to rip it in a different direction. It doesn't have to be the opposite direction, just a different one. Let's see if that worked. Ready? Wow, that worked much better. I still have a few little areas that didn't lay down, but I'm not going to notice those. In fact, on the transfer, you're probably going to see that the transfer itself covers up a lot of those areas, the image. So let's take one more transfer, dip it in the water, and see what happens when we lay it down. So let that sit for just a few seconds. Now, one of the things is I'm using the white clay on this because if it fractures a little bit, you don't want to see dark color showing through. That's going to impact the transfer. But with the transfers, the color of clay that you use underneath is really important. If you put a transfer on black clay, you're not going to see it at all. So you can use pastels or gradient blends or just any light colors, but white works the best for the transfers if you want the crispest, cleanest image. Let's see if that sat long enough. We're going to blot off the excess water. And just slide away the backing. See how that just eases off like that? So don't slide the whole backing off. It's going to curl up, making it hard for you to handle. And you're going to just gently slide out the backing as you smooth it down. This eliminates trapping air in between. So now you get a hint of this image with an iridescent glow. That's going to soften a little bit while we bake. Another thing this image is going to do is going to shrink a little bit. But what we want to use is the Fimo liquid gel. This is a liquid clay. And the reason we're going to use this is you might want to have a finish that's a matte finish on your project, which is cool, but I'm going to go for a resin finish. But even with my finger, I'm just going to take a little of this liquid clay gel. I don't need much, and I'm going to smooth it down over the transfer and onto the edges of the exposed foil. What this is going to do is seal it so that the image can't lift up or peel off after we bake. And this is going to bake with a lovely matte finish, which you might want to keep just like that. And knowing that that image transfer is going to shrink a little bit, I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to cut away, leave a little frame of that image transfer beyond the edges of the transfer's edge. Working on a small tile or mirror or piece of glass like I'm doing here is really helpful too, because it allows me to, we're going to pull that back up, it allows me to rotate it and see what I'm doing. So I cut a little too close, but that's okay because we're going to fake it until we bake it. I'm always okay when things don't go as planned because it's important to know there's always a way to fix it or embellish it. Now, the next thing I want to do is give it a beautiful frame to outline it, make it highlighted. So I'm using black polymer clay. I've already conditioned it and I've rolled it out on the same setting that the transfer's on. So the first thing I'm going to do is give it a little texture. You don't have to, you can leave it nice and smooth, and there's all kinds of cool textures, but one of my favorite is to use coarse sandpaper that you get at your hardware store. So to keep the clay from sticking to that, we're going to use a little release agent. This is just automotive protectant spray. It's typically found under the name Armor All or STP Son of a Gun, or you can even use generic brands you might find at your store. So we spread that on the clay, and that helps prevent the clay from transferring over onto the sandpaper. So when I use it to texture another color of clay, usually you don't have problems with contamination. Okay, so texturing it allows me not just to give it more visual interest, but it allows me to create a whole nother way to fix problems that come up when you put clay around clay. And you'll see what that is in a minute. So with my blade in an angle, I'm going to just shimmy it, and that lifts my clay up cleanly without tearing it or stretching it. And I'm going to cut a clean edge on here, and I'm going to lay it against one edge, and I'm going to push it up firmly against the clay. I don't need any glue for this step. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. This is going to fix that little issue I had with trimming a little too closely, and I still have plenty of my image left. Now let's trim away the excess from either side. Always handle your blade with lots of care. Now let's repeat that on the exposed sides. Next, I'm going to trim a little extra away here. Now, to make sure that this clay sticks together and you don't see any seams, we're going to go back with our sandpaper, and I'm just going to press and blend and heal the little seams that are between each of these strips. They'll fuse together when they bake. Okay, you get a little imperfection in there, and you take it out with your craft knife or your hobby knife, and then you never notice it because you've already got the texture in there. Now I'm going to go back, and you can use a cutter or you can eyeball it, and I'm going to trim this so I have a uniform border around each edge. This is going to bake for about 10 minutes. That's heat setting. You can bake polymer clay over and over and over again. So the general rule of thumb, and you can catch that in the tip with Christy Friesen about how to work with clay and bake it, but it's usually 20 minutes for every 1/4 inch of thickness. So when it comes out of the oven, you're going to have a piece that's stuck to your glass, and it's going to look like that. So just very gently, because those edges are healed against the white clay, but maybe not too securely, very carefully at an angle, same thing, just lift it up from your work surface, and then we're ready to glue on a bale. And you can find just a large number of decorative bales and findings to hang your pieces from. You can even use decorative jump rings, but I like the bale for a more finished look. So we're going to take a little of the E6000 glue, and you don't need much. A little dab will do ya. And we're going to let that set for about an hour or so before we go into the next step. But you don't want to wait that long to see what the next step is. So we've already got one ready. This one is from the Art Deco page of the vintage piece. And I've already glued my bale on, and it's not so finished in the back. And I think what separates an artist from a crafter is the quality of your finishing. So what we're going to do is take black polymer clay, and we're going to glue it to the back using my Polybonder glue. This is a high temperature glue that's designed for baking with polymer clay, but you can use it with other projects that you create as well. It's a high temperature super glue, actually. All right, so we don't need too much. When they say less is more, they were talking about glue. But make sure you get near the edges and the corners, but not all the way up to that. You don't want it to gush. So we're going to set this down and press it firmly. Now, you're going to see fingerprints in the back. I can smooth those away if I want a smoother finish, but one of the things I like to do is to give it a texture finish on the back again, and you can use a texture stamp or all kinds of things, but we're going to stick with that sandpaper. Okay, and I've trimmed away most of the clay, but it's going to need one more quick trimming. But again, with your release agent, your automotive protectant spray, spray a little on the clay, not so much on the sandpaper. And in this case, I like to have two pieces handy. One, I can hold it and push that texture into the clay while I work my way around all the edges, make sure that I get that bale covered, And I just move the sandpaper when I need to get to a new area. And I think this gives it a much more refined look, even though most people won't see it from the back. You know that you've gone that extra step and made something especially beautiful. So concentrating around the bail until you get all the area nicely stippled. You can also use a ball tip stylus that makes a lovely texture. And when you're happy with it, very carefully take your craft knife, and I actually cut along the edges, angling it in towards the back. So it gives me a little bit of a beveled edge. So you get the idea there. We don't have to do the whole thing. You can either leave that beveled edge smooth, or you can go back and roll it in with your texture, whatever texture you're using, and it gives it a textured bull nose edge. Kind of cool. So we're going to bake again, and we're going to pretend it's never been baked before. So I'm going to bake about 25 or 30 minutes. All right? And when it comes out of the oven, we're going to have a piece like this. And we're going to clean up our work area here, a little liquid clay. Now, you want to go back and use that small mirror or tile again when you use the Magic-Glos. You might be wondering, how am I going to keep the resin contained in here without spilling over the edge? Because there's no bezel edge to hold it in. Magic-Glos is truly magic. It'll hold a bead. So you always want to use a piece of clay. I usually use a little lump of my scrap clay. So let's take some of this black here. And I always work on a cure surface, whether I'm carrying it outside in the sun or using my UV cure lamp. And you want to put it up on a pedestal. This does a lot of different things. The first thing is, it keeps your piece from falling off when you're carrying it to your UV light source. Keeps it stable. The second thing is it allows you to make sure that it's nice and level. You don't know that your table's level or even that your floor is level, so I can check that. The third thing is, if I do add too much Magic-Glos and it overflows, it's going to run underneath. And that's going to make it easy for me to clean up, and my pendant won't be damaged. So those are some of the things that this little piece of clay will do for us. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is check and add, always from the middle, and add a small amount. And we're going to just give that a quick peek to see how it's running. I think it's running towards you, so I'm going to just level this just a little bit with my hands. And then you can take any tool. It can be a needle tool, a toothpick. Magic-Glos will clean up with a baby wipe or soap and water when it's in the liquid state. But once it's cured, it's permanent and it's waterproof. Now, you may take it just up to the edge of the actual image, or you may bring it all the way up to the edge of the frame. It'll actually hold a bead. Now, when you get the Magic-Glos, be sure to check out instructions and the tips, because it usually takes 2 or 3 thin layers to reach the outside edge of something that doesn't have a bezel wall that holds it into place. So if you need more, we're always going to add it from the middle, and you notice how this small piece of glass allows me to rotate it, ensuring that I get it into every single corner and edge. And if I need to reach the edges, it's going to pull in. It wants to dome, so don't be surprised if it doesn't stay on those edges. That's where that second layer comes in. When I add a second layer, if I need it, I always add it from the middle, spread it to the outside edges. Surface tension and gravity are what are going to hold it in to those exposed edges when you do need that extra little layer. And then the very last thing I'm going to do before I take it to my light source is check for some bubbles. I use a forced air tool in the form of a butane torch. So we're going to put on the safety in the back. You're going to pull that down, press the ignition away from you, hold in this button here. That's going to hold the flame on, and in 1 quick second, we're going to pass it over the top. If there's bubbles, they'll pop instantly. So let's see if we see any bubbles. There was one little bubble there. I hope you saw it. Now, it goes into our UV light source, either direct sunlight outside or the Lisa Pavelka UV lamp for 5 to 10 minutes. And then you're ready to add another layer if you need it, or you're ready to hang it on your chain, and you have a beautiful glass-like finish on an iridescent photo transfer. Thank you so much for joining me and seeing what you could do with some of my products. But you can see these and many more at firemountaingems.com, along with the new Fimo Professional Clay. Thanks so much for joining me, and happy claying.